Welcome to Umbrella Rebellion. I'm Marcy.
And I'm Dee.
We are finding healing after leaving a cult.
We will be discussing abuse and personal experience with the ATI, IBLP, and fundamental churches.
Trigger warning. This podcast may contain descriptions of various forms of abuse. Please take care for your safety and well-being while you are listening.
If the content becomes too much for you to handle, please turn this off. We hope to expose harmful teachings that lead to and justify abuse,
with the hope that those that are experiencing abuse can find support and escape from it.
Welcome back to Umbrella Rebellion. We are going to be doing our culty book club. We are on the lives on multiple platforms. And the background behind me is dark because I changed my setup, and that's my bed room behind me. So, yeah. I miss having my own space. Miss having my own space to do the podcasting. But I am here. Hello. Welcome in. Welcome in. We are going to be continuing The Body Keeps the Score, reading it. And then afterwards, if you want to join the discussion, you can hop over to the T of Talk so we can have you come up in a box. And hello, Miss Ashley. So good to see you. Think we're in chapter 5. I can't remember where we left off on. I think we're in chapter 6, actually. So we are in chapter 6 of The Body Keeps the Score. The title of the chapter is Losing Your Body, Losing Yourself. And if you want to follow along with me, it is going to be up on the screen on the Books of Faces and also on the Tubes of You. So otherwise, you just get to listen to my amazing reading voice and all of my tripping over words I don't know how to pronounce. Okay, so who is ready to continue diving into how our body keeps track of our trauma? So fun, so fun. Actually, this book has really been helpful to me. And I know a lot of people think it's a little bit too clinical for the everyday layperson, I guess. And it can be actually very activating for people who have experienced trauma. So I understand how some people might not be interested in reading this book, but to me, it is very helpful to understand the mechanics in which trauma flows through our brains and how it presents when we get into that trauma mode of it being triggered or whatever. So for me, it has been very helpful. So I don't know if anybody else is finding help in going through this with me. If you are, I would love to see comments of how this has been helping you or not. And this is going to be a long series. So, if this isn't really something that people are interested in, I don't know. Maybe we should just change gears and find a different book because I'm not having a lot of reception to people wanting to go through this with me. But I am here for those that want to. So if there's just one, even if it's just my friend Ashley, if it's just you and me sitting here going through this, I'm cool with that. All right. So our next section, let's just dive in, get ready. And then when 30 to 45 minutes, I usually stop. And then if anybody wants to come up in a box and discuss what we've discussed, what I've read, how it's going with you, you want to talk about your traumas and how you're processing it and where you're at in your journey, all good. So let's do it. Agency, owning your life. Agency, quote unquote, is the technical term for the feeling of being in charge of your life, knowing where you stand, knowing that you have a say in what happens to you, knowing that you have some ability to shape your circumstances. The veterans who put their fists through drywall at the VA were trying to assert their agency, to make something happen. But they ended up feeling even more out of control. And many of these once confident men were trapped in a cycle between frantic activity and immobility. Agency starts with what scientists call interoception, our awareness of our subtle sensory body-based feelings. The greater that awareness, the greater our potential to control our lives. Knowing what we feel is the first step to knowing why we feel that way. If we are aware of the constant changes in our inner and outer environment, we can mobilize to manage them. But we can't do this unless our watchtower, the MPFC, learns to observe what is going on inside of us. And let me back up a little bit so I can remember what MPFC stands for. Look that up. The medial prefrontal cortex, MPFC. Go back to where we were. The MPFC learns to observe what is going on inside of us. This is why mindfulness practice, which strengthens the MPFC, is a cornerstone of recovery from trauma. After I saw the wonderful movie March of the Penguins, I found myself thinking about some of my patients. The penguins are stoic and endearing, and it's tragic to learn how, from time immemorial, they have trudged 70 miles inland from the sea, enduring indescribable hardships to reach their breeding grounds, lost numerous viable eggs to exposure, and then almost starving, dragged themselves back to the ocean. Dragged themselves back to the ocean. If penguins had frontal lobes, they would have used their flippers to build igloos, devised a better division of labor, and reorganized their food supply. Many of my patients have survived trauma through tremendous courage and persistence, only to get into the same kind of trouble over and over again. Yeah, the repetitive pattern, right? Trauma has shut down their inner compass and robbed them of the imagination they need to create something better. The neuroscience of selfhood and agency validates the kind of somatic therapies that my friends Peter Levine and Pat Ogden have developed. I'll discuss these and other sensory motor approaches in detail in part 5. But in essence, their aim is threefold: to draw out the sensory information that is blocked and frozen by trauma, to help patients befriend rather than suppress their energies released by that inner experience, to complete the self-preserving physical action that were thwarted when they were trapped, restrained, or immobilized by terror. Our gut feelings signal what is safe, life-sustaining, or threatening, even if we cannot quite explain why we feel a particular way. Our sensory interrogatory continuously sends us subtle messages about the needs of our organism. Gut feelings also help us to evaluate what is going on around us. Man, I tell you what, one of the things that the cult did to me was completely explain away the necessity and usefulness of a gut feeling. Like, they literally taught you to not lean into gut feelings and to disregard them as irrational. So it's kind of neat. They warned us that the guy who is approaching feels creepy, but they also convey that a room with Western exposure surrounded by daylilies makes us feel serene. If you have a comfortable connection with your inner sensations, if you can trust them to give you accurate information, you will feel in charge of your body, your feelings, and yourself. However, traumatized people chronically feel unsafe inside their bodies. The past is alive in the form of gnawing interior discomfort. Their bodies are constantly bombarded by visceral warning signs, and in an attempt to control these processes, they often become expert at ignoring their gut feelings and in numbing awareness of what is played out inside. They learn to hide from themselves. The more people try to push away and ignore internal warning signs, the more likely they are to take over and leave them bewildered, confused, and ashamed. People who cannot comfortably notice what is going on inside become vulnerable to respond to any sensory shift, either by shutting down or by going into a panic. They develop a fear of fear itself. We know that panic symptoms are maintained largely because the individual develops a fear of the bodily sensations associated with panic attacks. The attack may be triggered by something he or she knows is irrational, but fear of the sensations keeps them escalating into a full body emergency. Scared stiff and frozen in fear, collapsing and going numb describe precisely what terror and trauma feel like. They are its visceral foundation. The experience of fear derives from primitive responses to threat, where escape is thwarted in some way. People's lives will be held hostage to fear until that visceral experience changes. The price for ignoring or distorting the body's message is being unable to detect what is truly dangerous or harmful for you, and just as bad, what is safe or nourishing. Self regulation depends on having a friendly relationship with your body. Without it, you have to rely on external regulation for medication, drugs like alcohol, constant reassurance, or compulsive compliance with the wishes of others. That explains a lot for me, needing that external regulation because the internal regulation was not there. Many of my patients respond to stress not by noticing and naming it, by developing migraine headaches or asthma attacks. Sadly, a middle aged visiting nurse told me she'd felt terrified and lonely as a child, unseen by her alcoholic parents. She dealt with this by becoming differential to everybody she depended on, including me, her therapist. Whenever her husband made an insensitive remark, she would come down with an asthma attack. By the time she noticed that she couldn't breathe, it was too late for an inhaler to be effective, and she had to be taken to the emergency room. Suppressing our inner cries for help does not stop our stress hormones from mobilizing the body. Even though Sandy had learned to ignore her relationship problems and block out her physical distress signals, they showed up in symptoms that demanded her attention. Her therapy focused on identifying the link between her physical sensations and her emotions, and I also encouraged her to enroll in a kickboxing program. She had no emergency room visits during the 3 years she was my patient. Somatic symptoms for which no clear physical basis can be found are can't pronounce that word, ubiquitous in traumatized children and adults. They can include chronic back and neck pain, fibromyalgia, migraines, digestive problems, spastic colon, irritable bowel, chronic fatigue, and some forms of asthma. Traumatized children have 50 times the rate of asthma as their non traumatized peers. Studies have shown that many children and adults with fetal asthma attacks were not aware of having breathing problems before the attacks. Alexithymia. No words for feelings. I had a widowed aunt with a painful trauma history who became an honorary grandmother to our children. She came on frequent visits that were marked by much doing, making curtains, rearranging kitchen shelves, sewing children's clothes, and very little talking. She was always eager to please. I don't want to do that. I don't want to do a flash goal. I don't know. I forgot to do a live goal, but oh well. Where was I? She was always eager to please, but it was difficult to figure out what she enjoyed. After several days of exchanging pleasantries, conversations would come to a halt, and I'd have to work hard to fill the long silences. On the last day of her visits, I'd drive her to the airport where she'd give me a stiff goodbye hug while tears streamed down her face. Without a trace of irony, she'd then complain that the cold wind at Logan International Airport made her eyes water. Her body felt the sadness that her mind couldn't register. She was leaving our young family, her closest living relatives. Psychiatrists call this phenomenon alexithymia, Greek for not having words for feelings. Many traumatized children and adults simply cannot describe what they are feeling because they cannot identify what their physical sensations mean. They may look furious but deny that they are angry. They may appear terrified but say they are fine. Not being able to discern what is going on inside their bodies causes them to be out of touch with their needs, and they have trouble taking care of themselves, whether it involves eating the right amount at the right time or getting the sleep they need. Like my aunt, Alexis alexithymics substitute the language for action for that of emotion. When asked, quote unquote, how would you feel if you saw a truck coming at you 80 miles per hour? Most people would say, quote, I'd be terrified or I'd be frozen with fear. And alexithymic might reply, how would I feel? I don't know. I'd get out of the way. They tend to register emotions as physical problems rather than as signals that something deserves their attention. Instead of feeling angry or sad, they experience muscle pain, bowel irregularities, or other symptoms for which no cause can be found. About 3/4 of patients with anorexia nervosa and more than half of all patients with bulimia are bewildered by their emotional feelings and have great difficulty describing them. That's where the eating your feelings come from. When researchers show pictures of angry or distressed faces to people with alexithymia, alexith, alexithymia, cannot say that word. They could not figure out what the people were feeling. One of the first people who taught me about alexithymia was the psychiatrist Henry Crystal, who worked with more than 1,000 Holocaust survivors in the effort to understand massive psychic trauma. Crystal himself, a concentration camp survivor, found that many of his patients were professionally successful, but their intimate relationships were bleak and distant. Suppressing their feelings had made it possible to attend to the business of the world, but at a price. They learned to shut down their once overwhelming emotions, and as a result, they no longer recognized what they were feeling. Few of them had any interest in therapy. I gotta let the dog in. Hold on. Come on, you. Move. Go lay down. Go. Ooh. Let's close the door. Hold on. There you go. Lay on the bed. His little tiny head is almost in view. Oh. Okay. Let's see. Where was I? Paul Fruin at the University of Western Ontario did a series of brain scans of people with PTSD who suffered from alexithymia. One of the participants told him, open quote, I don't know what I feel. It's like my head and body aren't connected. I'm living in a tunnel, a fog. No matter what happens, it's the same reaction: numbness, nothing. Having a bubble bath and being burned or graped is the same feeling. My brain doesn't feel, end quote. Cashmere, Cashmere, stop licking. Nobody wants to hear that. Bruin and his colleague Ruth Lanus found that more people were out of touch with their feelings the less activity they had in the self-sensing areas of the brain. Because traumatized people often have trouble sensing what is going on in their bodies, they lack a nuanced response to frustration. They either react to stress by becoming spaced out or with excessive anger. Whatever their response, they often can't tell what is upsetting them. This failure to blah, 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 blah. This failure to be in touch with their bodies contributes to their well-documented lack of self-protection and high rates of re-victimization, and also to their remarkable difficulties feeling pleasure, sensuality, and having a sense of meaning. People with alexithymia can get better only by learning to recognize the relationship between their physical sensations and their emotions. Much as colorblind people can only enter the world of color by learning to distinguish and appreciate shades of gray. Like my aunt and Henry Crystal's patients, they usually are reluctant to do that. Most seem to have made an unconscious decision that it is better to keep visiting doctors and treating ailments that don't heal than to do the painful work of facing the demons of the past. Depersonalization. One step further down on the ladder of self-oblivion is depersonalization. Is in its very blankness a vivid illustration of depersonalization. Depersonalization is common during traumatic experiences. I was once mugged late at night in a park close to my home, and floating above the scene, saw myself laying in the snow with a small head wound, surrounded by 3 sharp object wielding teenagers. I disassociated the pain of their stab wounds on my hands and did not feel the slightest fear as I calmly negotiated for the return of my emptied wallet. I did not develop PTSD, partly, I think, because I was intensely curious about having an experience I had studied so closely in others. Like, oh, my own trauma is now an observation for my own studies. Great. That's weird. And partly because I had the delusion that I would be able to make a drawing of my muggers to show to police. Of course, they were never caught, but my fantasy of revenge must have given me a satisfying sense of agency. Traumatized people are not so fortunate and feel separated from their bodies. One particularly good description of depersonalization comes from the German psychoanalyst Paul Schilder, writing in Berlin in 1928. Open quote. To the depersonalized individual, the world appears strange, peculiar, foreign, dreamlike. Objects appear at times strangely diminished in size, at times flat. Sounds appear to come from distance. The emotions likewise undergo marked alteration. Patients complain that they are capable of experiencing neither pain nor pleasure. They have become strangers to themselves. End quote. I was fascinated to learn that a group of neuroscientists in the University of Geneva had induced similar out-of-body experiences by delivering mild electric current to a specific spot in the brain, the temporal parietal junction. In one patient, this produced a sensation that she was hanging from the ceiling, looking down at her body. In another, it induced an eerie feeling that someone was standing behind her. This research confirms what our patients tell us, that the self can be detached from the body and live a phantom existence on its own. Similarly, Lannis and Fruin, as well as a group of researchers at the University of Groningen in the Netherlands, did brain scans on people who disassociated their terror and found that the fear centers of the brain simply shut down as they recalled the event. Befriending the body. Trauma victims cannot recover until they become familiar with and befriend the sensations in their bodies. Being frightened means that you live in a body that is always on guard. Angry people live in angry bodies. The bodies of child ABUSE victims are tense and defensive until they find a way to relax and feel safe. In order to change, people need to become aware of their sensations and the way that their bodies interact with the world around them. Physical self awareness is the first step in realizing the tyranny of the past. How can people open up to and explore their internal world of sensations and emotions? In my practice, I began the process of helping my patients to first notice and then describe the feelings in their bodies, not emotions such as anger or anxiety or fear, but the physical sensations beneath the emotions: pressure, heat, muscular tension, tingling, caving in, feeling hollow, and so on. I also work on identifying the sensations associated with relaxation or pleasure. I had them I help them become aware of their breath, their gestures and movements. I ask them to pay attention to subtle shifts in their bodies, such as tightness in their chest or gnawing in their bellies. When they talk about negative events that claim when they talk about negative events that they claim did not bother them. Noticing sensations for the first time can be quite distressing, and it may precipitate flashbacks in which people curl up or assume defensive postures. These are somatic reenactments of the undigested trauma and most likely represent the postures they assumed when the trauma occurred. Images and physical sensations may deluge patients at this point, and the therapist must be familiar with ways to stem torrents of sensations and emotions to prevent them from becoming re traumatized by assessing the past. Hey, Blue Light, good to see you. School teachers, nurses, and police officers are often very skilled at soothing terror reactions because many of them are confronted almost daily with out of control or painfully disorganized people. All too often, however, drugs such as Abilify, Zyprexa, and Seroquel are prescribed instead of teaching people the skills to deal with such distressing physical reactions. Of course, medications only blunt sensations and do nothing to resolve them or transform them from toxic agents into allies. The most natural way for human beings to calm themselves when they are upset is by clinging to another person. This means that patients who have been physically or sexually violated face a dilemma. They desperately crave touch while simultaneously being terrified of body contact. The mind needs to be re educated to feel physical sensations, and the body needs to be helped to tolerate and enjoy the comforts of touch. Individuals who lack emotional awareness are able, with practice, to connect their physical sensations to psychological events. Then they can slowly reconnect with themselves. Connecting with yourself, connecting with others. I'll end this chapter with one final study that demonstrates the cost of losing your body. After Ruth Lanus and her group scanned the idling brain, they focused on another question from everyday life. What happens in chronically traumatized people when they make face to face contact? Many patients who come to my office are unable to make eye contact. I immediately know how distressed they are by their difficulty meeting my gaze. It always turns out that they feel disgusting and that they can't stand having me see how despicable they are. It never occurred to me that these intense feelings of shame would be reflected in abnormal brain activation. Ruth Lanus once again showed that mind and brain are indistinguishable. What happens in one is registered in the other. Hey, welcome in, Rachel. Ruth bought an expensive device that presents a video character to a person lying in a scanner. In this case, the cartoon resembled a kindly Richard Gere. The figure can approach either head on, looking directly at the person, or at a 45-degree angle with an averted gaze. This made it possible to compare the effects of direct eye contact on brain activation with those of an averted gaze. It's really interesting. The most striking difference between normal controls and survivors of chronic trauma was in activation of the prefrontal cortex in response to a direct eye gaze. The prefrontal cortex, PFC, normally helps us to assess the person coming towards us, and our mirror neurons help to pick up his intentions. However, the subjects with PTSD did not activate any part of their frontal lobe, which means they could not muster any curiosity about the stranger. They just reacted with intense activation deep inside their emotional brains in the primitive areas known as the periaqueductal gray, which generates startle, hypervigilance, cowering, and other self protective behaviors. There was no activation of any part of the brain involved in social engagement. In response to being looked at, they simply went into survival mode. What does this mean for their ability to make friends and get along with others? What does it mean for their therapy? Can people with PTSD trust a therapist with their deepest fears? To have genuine relationships, you have to be able to experience others as separate individuals, each with his or her particular motivations and intentions. While we need to be able to stand up for yourself, while you need to be able to stand up for yourself, you also need to recognize that other people have their own agendas. Trauma can make all that hazy and gray. Oh, that's interesting. People who target others look for someone who avert their eyes to harm. Hmm, that's interesting. It's like people who have the intention of hurting others know the people who are vulnerable. I mean, I believe that's been scientifically proven. I just don't know where. All right. Well, that was the end of that chapter. What time is it? 2:32. Let's see. Um, it's kind of a long chapter. So I guess my question is, do we continue or do we take up the discussion at the moment? I know you kind of came in blue light at the end of the last chapter. Not sure how much you got. Mm. Oh, wow. That's, I mean, when you hear it from the horse's mouth, yeah. I was watching a documentary or something not too long ago, and they were talking about how people who are out on the prowl, they can quickly assess whether somebody is a easy target or not. You spent years learning how to look through people. Oh, wow. So you trained yourself to look through them and not at them. So you didn't avert your gaze. So you weren't considered someone to be preyed upon. That's interesting. All right. I think I'm going to go ahead and continue reading a little bit more. And then I will open it up to discussion. Chapter 7. Getting on the same wavelength, attachment and attunement. The roots of resilience are to be found in the sense of being understood by and existing in the mind and heart of a loving, attuned, and self possessed other. Why is my brain not understanding this? The roots of resilience are to be found in the sense of being understood by and existing in the mind and heart of a loving, attuned, and self-possessed other. Diana Fusha. What about podcast? The children's clinic at the Massachusetts Mental Health Center was filled with disturbed and disturbing kids. Christmas boots? What about Christmas boots? I'm confused. I'm reading a book. There were wild creatures who could not sit still and who hit and bit other children, and sometimes even the staff. They would run up to you and cling to you one moment and run away terrified the next. Some self-pleasured compulsively, others lashed out at objects, pets, and themselves. They were at once starving for affection and angry and defiant. The girls in particular could be painfully compliant. Whether oppositional or clingy, none of them seemed able to explore or play in ways typical for children their age. Some of them had hardly developed a sense of self. They couldn't even recognize themselves in a mirror. At that time, I knew very little about children, apart from what my two preschoolers were teaching me. But I was fortunate to work with a resident in training, Dr. Elizabeth Kobe, who was actively treating traumatized children on the children's ward, who introduced me to an experienced child psychologist, Nina Fish Murray, a student of the Swiss psychologist Jean Piaget in Geneva. I do not know how to pronounce that name. And who also had raised 5 children of her own. Piaget, not sure, based his theories of child development on meticulous, direct observation of children themselves, starting with his own infants, and Nina brought this spirit to the incipient trauma center at MMHC. Nina generously gave me a crash course on child development, primarily focused on Piaget's meticulous, direct observation of children. Nina was married to the former chairman of the Harvard Psychology Department, Henry Murray, one of the pioneers of personality theory, and she generously supported younger faculty members who shared her interest. She was fascinated by my stories about combat veterans because they reminded her of the troubled kids she worked with in the Boston public schools. Nina's privileged position and personal charm, combined with Elizabeth's dedication to the children she was treating, gave us access to the children's clinic, which at the time was still run by Freudian psychoanalysts with little interest in trauma. Dude, I have no idea what you're talking about, and it's not relevant to what I'm doing here. So, move on. I'm not going to discuss whatever it is you're throwing out there. Henry Murray had, among other things, become famous for designing the widely used thematic appreciation test. The TAT is a so-called projective test which uses a set of cards to discover how people's inner reality shapes their view of the world. Unlike the Rorschach's card we used with veterans, the TAT cards depict realistic but ambiguous and somewhat troubling scenes. A man and a woman gloomily staring away from each other, a boy looking at a broken violin. Subjects are asked to tell stories about what is going on in the photo, what has happened previously, and what happens next. In most cases, their interpretations quickly reveal the themes that preoccupy them. Following the basic ideas of the TAT, Nina and Elizabeth created their own set of test cards, specifically geared to the ethnic and social context in which the children lived. By cutting pictures out of magazines in the clinic waiting room, our first study compared 12 6 to 11-year-olds at the children's clinic with a with a group of children from a nearby school who matched them as closely as possible in age, race, intelligence, and family constellation. What differentiate words hard. What differentiated our patients was the abuse they had suffered within their families. They included a boy who was severely bruised from repeated physical corrections by his mother. A girl whose father had forcefully imposed himself on her at the age of 4, 2 boys who had been repeatedly tied to a chair and whipped, and a girl who, at the age of 5, had seen her mother, a woman of the night, raped, dismembered, burned, and put into the trunk of a car. Holy crap, that's traumatizing. Um, the mother's employer was suspected of sexually abusing the girl. An imp with a P. Trying to choose my words for TikTok and YouTube. The children in our control group also lived in poverty in a depressed area of Boston where they regularly witnessed shocking violence. While the study was being conducted, one boy at their school threw gasoline at a classmate and set him on fire. Oh, wow. Another boy who was caught in crossfire while walking to school with his father and a friend. He was wounded in the groin and his friend was killed. Given their exposure to such a high baseline level of violence, would their responses to the cards differ from those of the hospitalized children? One of our cards depicted a family scene, 2 smiling kids watching dad repair a car. Each child who looked at it commented on the danger to the man lying underneath the vehicle. While the control children told stories with beginning endings, the car would get fixed and maybe dad and the kids would drive to McDonald's. The traumatized kids came up with gruesome tales. One girl said that the little girl in the picture was about to smash in her father's skull with a hammer. A 9-year-old boy who had been severely physically abused told an elaborate story about how the boy in the picture kicked away the jack so that the car mangled his father's body and blood squirted all over the garage. It's very vivid. As he told us these stories, the children got very excited and disorganized. Nina and Elizabeth had to take considerable time out at the water cooler and go for walks before they could show them the next card. It was little wonder that almost all of them had been diagnosed with ADHD, and most were on Ritalin. Though the rug certainly didn't seem to dampen their arousal in this situation. The abused kids gave similar responses to a seemingly innocuous picture of a pregnant woman silhouetted against a window. When we showed it to the 7-year-old girl who'd been sexually abused at age 4, she talked about penises and vagina and repeatedly asked Nina questions about how many people have you humped. Like several of the other sexually abused girls in the study, she became so agitated that we had to stop. A 7-year-old girl from the control group picked up the wistful mood of the picture. Her story was about a widowed lady sadly looking out the window, missing her husband. But in the end, the lady found a loving man to be a good father to her baby. In card after card, we saw that, despite their alertness to trouble, the children who had not been abused still trusted in an easily benign universe. They could imagine ways out of bad situations. They seemed to feel protected and safe within their own families. They also felt loved by at least one of their parents, which seemed to make a substantial difference in their eagerness to engage in schoolwork and to learn. The responses of the clinic children were alarming. The most innocent images stirred up intense feelings of danger, aggression, sexual arousal, and terror. These images were not selected because they had some hidden meaning that sensitive people could uncover. They were ordinary images of everyday life. We could only conclude that for abused children, the whole world is filled with triggers. As long as they can imagine only disastrous outcomes to relatively benign situations, anybody walking into a room, any stranger, any image on a screen or a billboard might be perceived as a harbinger of catastrophe. In this light, the bizarre behavior of the kids at the children's clinic made perfect sense. To my amazement, staff discussions on the unit rarely mentioned the horrific real life experiences of the children and the impact of those traumas on their feelings, thinking, and self regulation. Instead, their medical records were filled with diagnostic labels: conduct disorder, or oppositional defiant disorder, or for the angry and rebellious kids, or bipolar disorder. ADHD was comorbid diagnosis for almost all. Was the underlying trauma being obscured by this by this blizzard of diagnoses? Biohazard. That come from? Now we faced two big challenges. One was to learn whether the different worldview of normal children. Why would he say normal children? That's weird. Why wouldn't he say, whoops, untraumatized children? Could account for their resilience, and on a deeper level, how each child actually creates her map of the world. The other equally crucial question was, is it possible to help the minds and brains of brutalized children to redraw their inner maps and incorporate a sense of trust and confidence in the future? Interesting. All right. It is 2:46. I think I will open it up to discussion. Blue light. Would you like to hop in a box and talk about anything? We will open it to discussion. And I know last time I had somebody in a box, I didn't realize that no one could hear the person. So I will pull the phone closer to the microphone. So hopefully they can hear you on YouTube's. Get the phone closer. I am. Well, your voice will be on YouTube now.
Well, that's good, I guess. Maybe.
We'll see if it actually works. I'm trying to capture both of our voices at the same time, and the phone is in the view. I'm gonna have to figure out a way to make this work for. Ooh, there we go. Let me see. Don't mind the phone in the periphery there. So, I know you kind of jumped in after I had started the book and everything, but do you have any thoughts about what we read?
Just that very definitely averting your eyes makes what do you call them that would be safe?
It makes you vulnerable to predators.
to re-victimization.
Mm-hmm.
It makes people who are unsafe to you
Can pick up on that
because of that.
Yeah.
I mean, my incident happened when I was 21.
Mm-hmm.
I'm 57 now, so it was a long time ago.
Yeah.
But he was trying to traffic. He wanted me to work with him so that he could traffic.
Oh, goodness. Okay.
And he did some pretty cruel things, and so, yeah. Finally, I was just newlywed, and finally I told my husband that I was moving back home to my mom and dad.
Yeah.
And we literally left town in the dead of night. and moved back to my hometown.
Wow.
Scary. I mean, it wasn't kind of scary. It was very scary. But I know my body literally holds all the trauma that has happened to me from when I was just a baby. My sister constantly, she's 5 years older than me, and she constantly tried to hurt me. And my whole life, and I know I have really bad back, and I have really bad neck, and all my joints hurt, and I know that it's because of the trauma.
Yeah.
And it's hard to get it. It's hard to find a therapist who is knowledgeable enough to truly, they just want you to talk about your trauma, what happened. They want to know everything that happened. And the reason I don't have a therapist now is because I don't want to deal with everything that happened 50 years ago.
Yeah.
You know, I understand it has affected me now, but teach me how to live without that.
Yeah. I mean, I totally get what you're saying. And my question is, have you looked specifically for trauma-informed therapist?
I only will go to a trauma-informed therapist.
Yeah.
I won't. I mean, there's no point of going to
Yeah.
anyone else. I don't need marriage counseling. I won't go to religious counseling.
I'm with you on that one.
Well, the best counselor I can say in the last 40 years of counseling that I have had, I've had 2 counselors that were good. The first one, we didn't talk about religion at all. I didn't know what she was. The second one was 6 years ago, and the reason I no longer see her was because I moved, and she was Jewish, and she said from the get-go, no, I'm okay with not talking about religion.
Yeah, that's the key.
Yeah, she knew that my dad at the time was a Southern Baptist preacher. So I'm like, no, I can't. I still, even today, if I was to go to church, as soon as the singing's over and the pastor starts preaching, I'm out. I just go catatonic and quote fall asleep.
Disassociate?
Yeah, people say my breathing is really, really shallow. They can, they have to literally get right in front of my face to see if I'm still breathing. And I'm like, I go to La La Land, and I don't know what's happening, and I do that when I go to family Christmases and that kind of stuff, because they think it's funny that
Oh my goodness.
I ran from my mom and got the crap beat out of me by my dad.
What? They think that's funny?
Yeah, they talk about it. They're like, oh yeah, you remember that time you ran from mom and ran right into dad? And I'm like going, actually, I ran from mom because she would not stop long enough. She wouldn't stop hitting me long enough to hear me out. And I ran to my dad because at that point I felt like she was my protector.
Mm.
Yeah, no, that's when I learned that the only you can protect yourself. You can't trust anybody else to.
Well, obviously not in your family, which is sad.
Not my family. I know I would give everything to protect my kids or my grandkids or my great-grandkids, but, it's just, my dog's gonna go off.
Oh, no.
My daughter just pulled up. Sorry.
Oh, that's the sad thing, like, unfortunately, by people not being there for us when we needed, assistance or, help or whatever, we have learned how to be that for other people because we didn't have it, right? So, I know you're muted right now because of the dog. But yeah, it's so important for therapists to understand that the trauma may affect where we're at now, but we have to understand and we have to learn how to process what we are feeling in our current life and get past that past trauma in our current life and not try to constantly bring us back to, our experiences, which can be re-traumatizing. So I think it's definitely important to find someone who can, like, be a therapist in the way that you need them to show up, right?
Yeah. No.
But, my personal experience, I've had several different therapists and some of them have been trauma informed. A lot of them do not understand cult mentality and the difference, that we experience having been in cults and how that has shaped where we're at, in this day and age, and how much we have to overcome beyond just physical, emotional, trauma. We also have the religious and the spiritual and the financial and emotional abuse that we have to work through as well, you know, and on a different level than a lot of other people experienced.
Yeah.
What do you find the most helpful in your journey to recovery and, processing your past traumas and moving forward?
What do I find most helpful?
Have you found anything that's helpful to you?
Well, a lot of mostly what I find that helps me is like I do a lot of grounding. I
Mhm.
do a lot of self-introspection, self-inspection and reflection. I talk to others who've been through the same experiences as I have. And so it helps me just the therapy and stuff help me learn generalized coping
Mhm.
mechanisms and things. But I think the lack of guidance has in turn made me to where I'm very I hold myself away from everybody.
Mhm.
Even if I'm in a crowded room, I used to be a go-getter. I used to be the one that was out there talking to everybody and helping everybody. And like when I was in the church, I was like on the prayer team, leading praise worship, doing the, I stayed busy doing, and now that I don't have that, it's really hard for me to do.
Mhm.
You know, I'm having to. I'm 57, and I'm having to learn how to be my own person all over again, and I never learned that. I never I never developed a sense of self because that was what I was taught. You know, you don't have a self. You're God. You belong to the church. You know, everything you do is supposed to be in service for others. And so I never learned how to take care of me. And now then, that's the biggest thing that I'm learning is to take care of me, care about what I want, I need. For example, my kids want to know what I want for Christmas. Well, I don't really want or need anything because when I have a need, I take care of it.
Right.
To do that, I mean, it was always like, give your 10% to the church. Well, the government takes 25%. You give 10% to the church, so that's 35%. And your city and state government take another 10%, so that's 45%. And you've got 55% to take care of all your bills, take care of your family. Because the church says, oh, give us your money and I will take care of your family. I'll help you take care of your family. I'll do this, I'll do that. No, they don't. No.
No, they they call it they feed us spiritually, right? We're paying for them to feed us spiritually when some of us need actual food.
Right. And that's just when my husband was dying, I literally had to go get my groceries from the food bank but my church was there holding their hand out when I got his life insurance, and that was 10% of what was supposed to pay off my house, but they weren't there to even support me in anything. And I know I'm rambling. I'm sorry.
Oh no, that's fine. That's kind of what, I want to have our discussion is anybody who needs to talk through anything after we've kind of dug up some stuff by reading this book. I think it's important for us to process the information that we're, learning and going through and, find ways for us to apply things to our lives today through what we're learning to, move forward and heal. And, complaining about how the church doesn't help you and hasn't helped you is totally valid. I've had many experiences the same, or similar. I'm not going to say the same as you, but,
No,
having a need.
they're exactly the same, but at the same time, it's amazing all over the country how closely related every incident is. It's almost like they have a guidebook that they're reading.
Yeah, they call it the Bible.
How not to treat people. Oh, you're supposed to do this, and this, but, we're the best, and we're gonna not do that.
Any excuse for them to blame you for your problems and get absolved from their responsibility as spiritual leaders to help and guide us, right?
Yeah, well, I've looked at many a spiritual leader and said, your book there says that for those who much is given, much is expected. And I'm like, oh, so, You do you. Hi, Ashley. So anyway, okay, I'm done talking.
That's fine. I have a comment. You don't have to have the camera on if you don't want. You can turn it off. There's a comment on the tube. Family asked what I want for Christmas, and I'm like, let me get back to you. You know, usually my request is, look, I just want y'all to come hang out with me. You know, I want to see y'all happy. I want to give y'all things that y'all need. I want to, y'all to be excited. Always ask for money, right? If all else fails, I'll take some money. Mm.
Because I have family in Georgia, Oklahoma, and Kansas.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not going to see the Oklahoma family until after Christmas. I won't see the Georgia family until April. So I send them money. Not even a fancy card. Why spend so much money? Fancy card, and that they can't eat it.
Instead of, there we go. All right. It looks like I'm back. Okay. Yeah. Sometimes it's hard when we've spent our whole entire lives, trying to play that role of submissive Christian to yeah, sorry about that. I forgot to plug in my Ethernet. And so the Wi-Fi likes to drop out every once in a while. And when we think about others all the time, when somebody asks us to think about ourselves, we are not used to doing that in the environments that we were, raised in. No, it's not. It's mine. Oh, goodness. But yeah, I mean, that is something that I have been working on is, doing things that make me happy and not always thinking about like every other thing that I need to do for other people. And recently that has led to me cutting off a few people because it's just healthier for me to not involve myself with people who can't accept me. So that's been interesting. Hey, Poetic, good to see you. But if there's anybody else that would like to come up and discuss what we read in the book or, any things, I have the ability to do that on the Tiki Talks. And you're more than welcome to come up and talk about whatever's on your mind, whatever's pressing. But if I don't get anybody else in the box or any chats, then I think I'm going to shut it down here shortly. I've got a lot of stuff to do. I really want to I spent this past week like cleaning up the area that I'm in so I could have a designated area for my computer that I do all the editing on. And so that's why the background on the tubes is um blurred because my bed's behind there. It's the rest of my room is a mess. But enjoying reading this book, and I really hope that maybe we can get a few more people to join us here and there, and we can get some good discussions going. Yes, exactly. Well, clearing off workspace, essentially. I had to go through like 2 years of mail. It was insane. I was like, we have been dumping mail on this credenza or whatever you want to call it for like 2 years, and it's insane. So I have a whole entire garbage bag full of shredded mail. But I really think that this book is helping me understand how trauma has affected me, how it's bringing up things in the present because of the past traumas. And I really enjoy learning about that stuff because it helps me understand, like, when I'm in those moments, what is happening and why it's happening, and then I can process and be like, okay, this is not what's currently happening. I am not in trauma. I am not in an unsafe place. I am safe. I am good, and it's helped heal a lot for me, which I was not really expecting reading this book. So, if you would like to catch up because you haven't been with me for all of the readings, I do have a playlist on the Tubes of the U. And oh, did you? Okay, good. Yeah, I've had some different people comment that, it's kind of a very heavy clinical book and they don't recommend it for lay people, but I guess because I'm in the medical field, being a medical coder, it really helps me understand the anatomy and the process in which trauma, you know, flows through your brain. So for me, it helps to understand it. I guess that's, not the case for everybody, and I understand that. But this is a really long book. I don't know. I didn't realize how long it was when I started. So who knows how long this series is going to last? I might have to start doing a 2-hour reading just so we can get through it eventually. We'll be here until next year. We only do 1 hour at a time. Oh man. Let me see what's going on next Saturday. If I will be able to do another Saturday book club. Mm-mm-mm-mm. I might. I have to find out if the soccer game that is scheduled on Thursday, next Saturday. I know 2026 is only a few weeks away. It's going to take us till the end of 2026 if I keep going at this rate. um, but yeah, I might be able to do next Saturday. So I'm gonna have to talk with my son and see if he needs to attend that soccer game on Saturday or not, or if it's just their varsity team. So, you took college psych and only Googled a few times. That's awesome. Oh man. Yeah, there's a few things in there I kind of want to go back. Like, I think I need to have like a an abbreviation, like, um in the interpretation, because he'll talk about something and he'll describe what it is and then he'll use abbreviations, but we don't always complete that part in the same session. So I'm like, oh wait, what was that? I had to go back pages, figure it out. So I need to have a glossary set up so I can be like, oh yeah, that's what that was. So all right, guys. Well, I'm gonna go ahead and get off, and I really appreciate y'all being here. And hopefully, I can be consistent and be back next Saturday. But I will let y'all know. So, if somebody has not told you today or ever, I am proud of you.